Good day, everyone. Today we will be having lesson 3 of our GenEd 05 Purposive Communication. For this lesson, we will be having the intercultural and global communication. So to start with that, I am once again Miss Clofelyn Baes-Austria, your instructor for this subject. Okay. So for our lesson 1, there is the term intercultural and global. What is the meaning of intercultural and global, and why do you think it is still part of communication, or it is within the communication? So when we say intercultural, it is occurring between or involving two or more cultures. So when we say intercultural, there is the interaction of different cultures. For example, you came from different countries, and then there's an interaction between you and some other else from different country rather than yours. Okay, and for global, it has something to do with the entire world, so it is already worldwide. So do you think communication can be intercultural or global? So for this lesson, we will be identifying how communication became intercultural and global. Okay? So we will be having the uh, aspects or characteristic of communication as intercultural and global communication. And with that, we will be having the dimensions of culture to identify the connection of intercultural and global to communication. We need to unlock this five dimensions of culture so that we can see from this kind of culture or from this dimension of culture, how can we have conversation, or how do we deliver conversation with these different dimensions of culture. Okay, so in this lesson also, you will be identifying the approach and ways on how to interact within this dimension, no, using communication. So in different broader situation or aspects or characteristic, we will be digging deeper into this one by one. Okay, so first one is the individualism versus collectivism. So from the two terms itself, they are very different from each other. So we will be having it one by one, or individualism first, and then later on we'll be having the collectivism. So the 1.1 is of course the individualism, or the individualist cultures, and it emphasizes personal achievement at the expense of group goals, resulting in a sense of competition. So for the individualist culture, your own success is very important. So it doesn't matter if your coworkers or your workmates will achieve that too. But for individualist culture, your self achievement, okay? It doesn't matter if you will left somebody behind, okay? Since it is at the expense or offset of your group goals, but eventually, at the end, if you do value individualist culture, you will be having your own success, not thinking of others. Okay. And another, of course, if that is your mindset, if that is your culture, it will result in the sense of competition. So you are competing with other people, not just with yourself. Okay. So that is the individualist culture. And then to identify deeply what is individualist, or what is individualist culture, or what is individualism, we do have these traits. No? First one is uniqueness. Second one is autonomy, independence, and the last is self-sufficiency. When we talk about uniqueness, of course, as individual, you are different from others. Okay, you are unique. And if you are individualist, you are unique. Okay, next is autonomy, wherein having individualist culture, you are governing yourself. When we say you are governing yourself, you can guide yourself, you can have set of rules for yourself and so on and so forth. You can be the tour guide of your own, okay? And then next one is independence. You don't need the support of anybody. Okay? You can see yourself as a sole individual, and then you can stand on your own, and that is independence. Next is self-sufficiency. When you are uh, individualist, you can suffice yourself. Okay, when we say self-sufficiency, you can provide anything for yourself. For example, you can grow or you can plant your own food, veggies and fruits, and then it is enough for you to live, no, or to have food for daily needs. So you have that characteristic, you have that trait if you want to have, or if you do have, the individualist culture. And for another point for individualist culture, there are some countries that has individualist or individualism, no, that has individualism. Examples are the United States and the Western Europe. Now, why do you need to identify this individualist countries? Of course, when you go to those different places, you already know what is their culture, okay? A requirement, no, that you need to know their requirements or their culture first before you go there, so that you will not be having the literal culture shock, since they're different from yours. Okay, so individualist countries are the United States. Those are the Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Utah, Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana. Do not forget the Alaska and the Hawaii, the Mississippi, Illinois, uh, Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, the Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. Also, the Pennsylvania, the New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Maine, and those with abbreviation countries, the Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Vermont. Okay, so when you hear those countries, first thing you need to know is that they do have the individualist culture. So you need to identify, or you need to bear in mind that self success or self awareness, starting from self awareness and self achievement, is very important with those countries. Okay. And then when you go there, of course, you need to achieve also what they want to achieve, the individual achievement of goals. Okay, and other countries for that are the Western Europe. Those are the Netherlands, Belgium, France, Switzerland, Monaco, uh, Germany, of course, Austria. So ako pala ay from Western Europe, Luxembourg, and Liechtenstein. Okay, so those are the countries under Western Europe that is characterized as individualist, no, or they do have individualist culture. And then once again, once you go there, make sure na you are looking forward for your own success, okay? For your uniqueness, for your autonomy, for your independence, and of course, your self sufficiency. And then for the other hand of the dimension number one, the individualism versus collectivism, let's have now 1.2, the collectivism or the collectivist culture. And it emphasizes family and work group goals. So if we have the difference of the individualist and collectivist, of course, for the individualist, self goal, no, or self achievement. But in this one, no, for the collectivist culture, it embraces the work group goal. So when you are done with something, of course, you will bring everybody for your success. In individualist kasi, it's just your own success, okay? So for promotion, for example, you're doing your best just for yourself, not for the team if you're individualist. And if you are a collectivist, you are doing it and bring your team upward, no? And then for this case, there are strengths and weaknesses between the two. And then later on, we will be identifying that. Okay? So again, the characteristics or traits of individualism and collectivism do have its strengths and weaknesses. But for now, let's have the traits of collectivism. If you do have collectivistic culture, your social rules focus on promoting selflessness. Okay? So you are not selfish, okay? You are promoting selflessness. You're into the betterment of other people. Next is working as a group. In individualist culture, you are working alone. Okay, you are doing something for yourself. And then in collectivism, you are with your team or with your group. Next is doing what's the best or what's best for society. For the individualist culture, no, or individualistic culture, you are doing your best for yourself. But for collectivism, you are doing your best for the society. Next, last one, families and communities have a central role. Okay? So families and community, hindi siya soul, hindi siya nagsa-stand alone, no? But with the entire family and communities, no? Hindi siya pwedeng, if we have collectivist culture or our culture is collectivist, lahat dala, no? Not just yourself. And then, for the case of collectivism, there are also countries that are collectivist, and most of that are the Asian countries. Okay, let me mention four. Of course, China, Korea, Japan, and Philippines. And for that, no, we can say that we are really collectivist, or really have collectivistic culture. So for example, in the Philippines, even we still have our own family, no? It is okay to live with your parents. No, in other countries like in America or in the United States, or you mentioned na countries where the individualist, no, they need to stand alone. They need to be independent enough to live without their parents' supervision. But in our case, in most of the Asian countries, no, it is fine kahit na may apo na 'no, nandun pa rin kasama ng lolo't lola. And there's nothing wrong with that, okay? Because that is our culture. For example, in the other three countries, no, China, Korea, and Japan, they really value family, no, or the names of their family. Even, oh, for example, sa China, di ba, they even bring the business of their elderlies, no, and then inherit it, and then continue the legacy, make it better and improve, no, with the innovation of the globalization and different other things, no, in China. In Korea, since again same with our culture, no, they do embrace family. They do have family centered views in living, and they even have family days and so on and so forth, like in the Philippines, no, the usual Sundays and the likes, no. Also in Japan, they also embrace the family centeredness or the family oriented culture, wherein they give importance to the little ones. They make sure na they are studying well, they are doing good at school, and parents really supervise students or their child for their betterment. Okay. Likewise in the Philippines. So we call it collectivist since we are doing the traits of having collectivistic culture, the social rules, focus on promoting selflessness as a group, diba? Doing what's the best for the society, families, and communities. Okay? And for that, no, like what I've said a while ago, there is strengths and weaknesses for the both of this dimension, the individualism and collectivism. Both collectivist and individualist cultures have their strengths and weaknesses. People in the individualist culture are susceptible to loneliness, and people in collectivist culture can have a strong fear of rejection. So, another example, for the individualist culture, no, they're very susceptible to loneliness. They will stay alone, or they will just embrace the sense of being alone or being with themselves, okay, with oneself. And then kaya sila prone, or they're really into sad feeling kasi nga they feel na mag-isa sila, okay, they feel na walang silang support with other individual. Eh kasi nga po, it's within their culture, no? We can say na strong sila kasi they can stand on their own feet already, with their own feet already, no? Even though they're just 18 years old. But then again, no, at some other points, or yung weakness part of individualist culture is that tinitignan natin na kaya nila, no? But some point, may mga time na nada-down din sila. So they still need somebody to lean on, no? And we just don't need to look at them na straightly independent, can govern themselves, can suffice themselves, 'di ba? So hindi siya gano'n. And kaya nagiging susceptible yung mga individualistic individuals into loneliness. And for the collectivist culture, no, since they embrace working with different people, working with the support of others, depending on others, once they felt rejection, babagsak na or guguho na yung moral nila and even their motivation to live. Okay? Kaya dito, sabi dito, yung collectivist culture have a strong fear of rejection. So, let's go back dun sa countries na collectivist, no? In Korea and Japan, the number one cause of suicide, no, girl, man, or boy, is because they are afraid to be disgraced in their families. Kaya sila nagsusuicide kasi they disappoint their parents, they disappoint their families, they failed for something about themselves, no? For example, in school, in business, and so on and so forth. Once they felt that, they felt rejected from their peer or from their support, or even, yeah, with their families. And then they will end up ending their lives because they really have this strong fear of rejection. Kasi pag naging disgrace na sila, or if they disappoint their family, automatically your rejection will not come from other people but from their families. Kaya they just choose to end their lives. So again, there are positive points for individualist culture and collectivist culture, but then again, there are other downfalls for its culture, no? Now, that's just one dimension of culture. Let's have now the second one, the high versus low context dimension of culture. Based on lab around 2003, communication varies according to its degree of field dependence, and that it can be classified into two general categories, the high and the low context. And according to Hall, 1971, high context and low context communication refers to the degree to which speakers rely on factors other than explicit speech to convey their meaning. So, into high and low context, since from our previous lesson, we talked about communication being contextual, and there are five aspects under it. This time, there is the leveling, no? We will be stating it as high or low context with this lesson. So first thing, let me present to you Edward T. Hall. He is a cultural anthropologist. When we say anthropologist, he is digging deeper into the culture with its biology and so on and so forth. Okay, and he is PhD in Columbia University. He is also best known for his work in intercultural relation and communication. That's why we have him under high versus low context. Last one is that one of the founders of intercultural communication study. So he contributes well under the intercultural and global communication. So what are his contributions kaya? So let's have the first one, his framework about high context culture and low context culture. So we will be still needing the collectivism culture and individualism culture for this one. No? For the high context, there is the implicit manner of communication. When we say implicit, high context in culture mo, if you know how to read between the lines. When we say reading between the lines, there are deeper meaning, there are deeper understanding for each idea or for each information that is given. In low context culture, sa high individualism, when we say explicit, every detail in a conversation, in a written text, in social media, everything is detailed. Okay? Every information is included to that matter. No, but then in the contrary with the high context, no, hindi mo kailangan maging detailed to your information kasi people with that kind of culture, with high context culture, can eventually understand that manner just by reading between the lines of that information. Okay? The next is for the high context culture, according to Hall, high commitment to long-term relationship. Okay? When we say high commitment to long-term relationship, yung sa work, for example, na high context yung culture mo if you can stay in a job or in a business because you committed with it with your time and effort. For the low context culture, you're focused on the requirement. So for example, you are done with the requirements for that work or for that report. That's all. That's done. Okay. But not looking into the future aspects of it, because in high context culture, you are aiming to have it or to prolong it. In low context, once na you're done, you're done. Okay? You are into the short-term goal aside from or rather than the long-term goal for the high context culture. Okay, next is about issues, no, managing issues. In high context, they can put solution into merge issues. So for example, they are encountering in their culture, they're encountering different problems, different they do have different agendas, no, for their society. They can merge or make it one para sa solution nila, and they can make it better, no, na pagsasamahin. Kasi why? Kasi sometimes, no, may mga issues tayo in life na pwede naman palang gawing isa na lang at hindi na natin iisa-isahin pa or isipin isa-isa, no? And in high context, ganun daw. So you will be collecting it all and then merge it as one. In low context culture, they are avoiding emerging of issues. They want to address issues one by one. Okay? Next one is that not kept separate and precise. So for example, what does it mean, no? Yung not kept precise, ay not kept separate and yung sa low context ng culture is precise. So for example, ah pinag-merge nila 'di ba yung issues. For the other point naman, kahit magkakasama siya, kahit pinag-merge na nila 'no, ah, hindi nila pinaghihiwa-hiwalay yung mga information na alam nila na mag-i-stand alone. So what is the example for this 'no? Sa issues in society 'no, for example, they have information about the loss of employment or underemployment, migration, pollution, population, COVID. Okay? They will still organize it. Okay? The issues will be still organized even though 'di ba minerge nila and then parang naka-organized or with plan lagi yung iniisip nila or yung mindset nung high context culture, ganun yung pagkakasunod-sunod, okay? And then dun sa ah, low context culture naman, kaya natin natatawag na precise kasi nga hindi nila kinombine, 'di ba? Hindi nila pinag-isa so that they can address it one by one and hopefully have a solution, exact solution from each issues or issue that they are facing. Kaya siya nagiging precise. Next, about the time. Relaxed about time, no? For the high context culture, okay lang yan kasi kagaya sa atin 'di ba, Filipino, collectivist tayo. Um, Hindi tayo meron tayong tinatawag pala na Filipino time kasi parang, okay lang ma-late kasi ide-deduct na lang sa sahod, gano'n, 'di ba? In, low context culture, dun sa individualist culture like sa Amerika nga or sa Europe, they're very punctual. Okay, they want or they really value time. Actually, sa other countries din naman in Asia, they are punctual. Talaga lang naman dito sa Philippines may tinatawag na Filipino time, no? Pero in low context or individualist culture, they are very punctual. They really value it, okay? So when we look at it as a whole, high context culture may be into joining or having different individuals in a topic, no, or in an issue, but in low context dapat isa-isa. They have the focus, they have the straightforward look into something to finish it or to have a precise solution to it. No, and in high context kasi pinagsasama-sama nila to have a solution for that. Okay? And then next one, Hall's theory, for high and low context. So first is the covert and overt messages. In high context, we mentioned already na implicit or you can read between the lines. Ibig sabihin, there are hidden messages into different information. Sa low context naman, overt, kasi explicit, so nakikita mo na agad lahat ng details into communication, for example. Next is internalized messages and then plainly coded messages. Sa high context or sa collectivist theory or sa collectivist culture, kaya natin bigyan ng meaning yung mga information na parang ang simple lang ng dating pero with a deeper meaning pala siya. Now, sa low context, plainly coded, ibig sabihin direct. Direct to the point yung information or yung communication na nangyari. Next is the the extensive non-verbal codes and then the detailed or details verbalized. Sa high context, even though symbols lang or codes lang, no, they can have it or they can understand it. They can comprehend it. And in low context naman, theory, details are verbalized para mas magkaintindihan. Next, for the reaction, it has something to do with the communication na kasi, no? Reaction is reserved for the high context kasi nga they are collective, they have different individuals involved, so hindi maiisa-isa yung reaction. But in low context, sa individualism, since nakafocus sa isa, it can surface, no? The reaction can be raised, the reaction can be on the surface. Next, distinct in and out groups, and then flexible in and out groups. So, in communication or in interaction, no, sa collectivism or sa high context, you have your certain group. You have your certain members or friends. But in low context, since you are standing on your own, you are individualist, you're flexible. You can be into different groups, you can be into different members, and so on and so forth. Next naman is for the bonds, the interpersonal bonds and or the strong interpersonal bonds and the weak interpersonal bonds. So for this one naman, no, in collectivist or in high context, strong yung pakikipag-interact mo with other people kasi nga, you are used to it. You have the culture of interacting with other people. And then sa low context, since you are solely with yourself, weak yung interpersonal bond mo. Okay, you are just focusing kasi on yourself so that when you go into the group, when you go out of your box, nagiging weak yung interpersonal bond mo. Next is high commitment. High commitment into high context kasi nga required siya since you are dealing with your group, sabi nga dito, distinct in and out group. So, kaya kailangan ay with high commitment, like dun sa framework kanina, di ba? High commitment. And sa low naman po is low commitment. So, ibig sabihin, since you can suffice yourself, you have your self-sufficiency, pwede mong iwan yung group mo and then again, go with your own, no? And lastly, for the time again, no, open time for the high context and then close time sa context. So for example, sa collectivist culture kasi, once na hindi pa tapos yung entire group, mag-extend kayo with your work, 'di ba? Kahit naka 8 hours na kayo, kailangan mo tulungan yung bawat isa. But with the individualist culture or low context culture, no, they are very strict sa time since into their culture per hour yung bayad sa kanila, 'di ba? They are close to time. Hindi pwedeng mag exceed Hindi pwedeng kulang. Dapat saktong-sakto lang with the time. Okay? And for the definition itself of high and low context, we have here high context cultures, verbal messages have little meaning without the surrounding context, which includes the overall relationship between all the people engaged in communication. So in high context culture, since collectivist siya, 'di ba? Sa messages natin, we can have meaning, no, without even looking into the context itself. Kahit hindi mo natignan yung psychological, situational, relational, context of the communication and so on and so forth. Because as a whole, you can see the conversation or the communication as one. But in low context culture, ine-exclude mo yung causes or yung entire group para, kasi sabi dito, exclude many of those stimuli and focus more intensely on the object communication event. The message itself means everything. Sa high context, we can give opinions or different message, the connotation, di ba? But in low context, ang required is the denotation. Yung message itself, yung information na nakapaloob itself. Okay? And then, actually, that's all for high and low context of communication. For the next one, as you can see, 'di ba? There is a leveling. There is what we call it imbalance, no? There is heavier. There is only one in front, okay? So when we are talking about this kind of characteristics, for example, in the culture, this is what we call power distance. Power distance kasi merong nagse-separate sa inyo, sa bawat isa sa inyo, and that is the power. Okay, so what is power distance? Refers to the relationship between higher ranking and lower ranking individuals that depends on how the latter act to the former. It is an anthropological concept used in cultural studies to understand the relationship between individuals with varying power, the effects, and their perception. So, for the power distance, uh, papasok si relational context. Dun sa communication is contextualize natin, no? So, ibig sabihin, sa culture na tinatawag natin, there is a difference between person with authority and person with none. So, kailangan nating tignan alin ba yung culture natin about power distance. May mga countries kasi na they are still having monarchy, may king and queen, and then into a democratic country like Philippines, meron pa rin bang power distance or wala? Okay, no? And I think even uh, any single individual here in our country knew na there is still power distance occurring even though we are in a democratic country. Okay? For the for this dimension of culture, no, for the power distance, there is what we call low power distance and high power distance. So since nag-start tayo to talk about the dimension, meron ng low and high or group and unregroup, yung individual. For this one, for the power group, meron din tayo, or for the power distance culture, we are having differences also between the low power distance culture and high power distance culture. The first one is minimize inequalities between people. For the low power distance, ibig sabihin naka-level or halos magkalapit lang si person with authority and then si person with none. Kapag naman high power distance culture, sobrang layo ng agwat ni person with authority or power with those people who doesn't have it. Okay? So inequalities and hierarchy are accepted between people. So kahit ilang henerasyon na ng pamilya, meron pa rin sa politika, halimbawa, 'di ba? Next is boss and employees treat one another as equals and with equal rights for the low power distance. And for the high power distance, we can see the difference already, diba? Employees respect managers and managers expect obedience. So we can see linear collaboration or interaction with the high power, no? Laging naka-level up on the other step yung person with authority, 'di ba? And then for the third one, no, the decentralization of power and centralization of power. Kapag sinabi nating decentralization, of course, there is no center, there is no one with power, everyone is equal. And then when we say centralization of power, there is always an altar for those person with authority. Okay? And the next is the subordinates expect to be consulted, and then boss expect initiatives from employees. Look at the difference. Subordinates expect to be told what to do, and then si boss is expected to take all initiative. So walang interaction. Parang ang nangyayari, just follow, no? Sa low power distance, the person with authority is getting suggestions from different individuals or from the member of the group. And then sa high power, no, walang pake. Okay? Next is the ideal boss is a democrat, and the ideal boss for the high power is autocrat. Okay, we can see already the difference from that. Democrat, so democratic, and for the autocrat, authorized or authority dapat siya. Okay, next for the people disapprove of status sa low power, sa high power, privileges for the managers are expected or for the higher rank are expected. Sa low power, since we are all equal, walang higher status, walang lower status. Okay? Economic status yan. Mas mayaman, mas mahirap. Okay? Next is less formal social interaction. Sa high power, talagang formal yung social interaction because there is the power imposed. So you can't level with a person with authority kasi you can have a casual conversation because formal lang dapat. Okay? With respect nga, sabi, di ba? And nasa boss lang lahat yung respect. And then, for the low power naman, no, less formal. Kasi they can be, or the person with authority can be casual with their subordinates. Next is the narrow range of salaries. When we say narrow range, walang mas malaking sweldo, mas sobrang laki yung sweldo, at saka walang mas sobrang liit ng sweldo. Okay, yung tinatawag sa atin dito sa Philippines na minimum, okay, ano lang siya, nag-equivalent lang siya with the director, with the administrators, and so on and so forth. But in high power distance culture, sobrang laki. Ibig sabihin, hindi na talaga, tawag dito, yung advantage given to the subordinate is really low with those individuals with authority. Okay, kasi nga high yung power nila, and that's the power distance. of the culture that we are having in different setup, culture setup. Okay. And that's the third one. So for the fourth one, we have the value orientations, and fifth one is the uncertainty avoidance. Let me first unlock the definition of value orientations. This are the cultural value orientations represent the basic and core beliefs of culture. These basic beliefs deal with humans' relationships with one another and with their world. And for the uncertainty avoidance is a cross-cultural phenomenon that describes how different cultures or societies react to and tolerate uncertainties. More especially, it refers to how communities cope with unpredictability and uncertainty that are evident in the major aspects of governance. For those last two dimensions, that will be for your activities. Now, the examples and further explanations will be into your activity. Okay, and then for this lesson kasi it is really broad. It tackles different aspects, characteristics. So if you do have questions, we will be have it or let's have it during our synchronous class, okay? And then for this lesson, I think that's all. Stay safe. Thank you very much for listening and God bless. Once again, I am Miss Vafeline Baes-Austria, your teacher for this subject. Bye bye.